Nobody tells you this when you're young, but waking up in the dead hours between 3 and 5 in the morning isn't insomnia. It's a warning, and most people ignore it until it's too late. I'm 92 years old. My name is Ruth Coleman, and for the last 6 years, I've been waking up at exactly 30:47 in the morning, 3 or 4 times a week. Some nights my heart races. Some nights I'm perfectly calm, but I'm awake, wide awake, and I know now that those wake-up calls saved my life. It was a Tuesday morning in March, 4 years ago. I woke up at 30:30, and this time something felt different. My chest was tight, not painful, just heavy, like someone had laid a hand there and pressed down. I sat up in my empty bed. My husband Bill had been gone 7 years by then, and I felt this overwhelming need to call my son David. At 3:30 in the morning, my hands started shaking as I reached for the phone. My daughter Sarah thought I was losing my mind. "Mom, you're not sleeping well because you're anxious," she'd said the week before. "Maybe you need to see someone. Get some pills." Even my doctor suggested a sleep study, like this was a medical problem that needed fixing. But here's what they didn't know. Here's what nobody tells you about those dark, quiet hours when the rest of the world is sleeping and you're lying there staring at the ceiling. Those hours aren't interruptions. They're invitations, and if you're waking up at that time, especially if you're older, especially if you've lived long enough to know the difference between your mind wandering and something deeper calling, you need to hear this before you miss what you're being told. I didn't always believe in this. I want to be clear about that. When Bill died in 2009, I slept like the dead myself. Grief does that sometimes. You'd think I'd be up all night crying, but no. I'd fall asleep at 8 o'clock and not wake up until the sun came through the curtains. My body shut down because my heart couldn't handle being awake. But then, about 18 months after the funeral, the wake-up started. 3 in the morning, 4:15, sometimes 3:47 exactly. I started noticing it was the same time over and over. I'd lie there in the dark, and the house felt so empty I could hear the refrigerator humming 2 rooms away. I'd think about Bill, about our daughter Sarah's troubled marriage, about David's business that was struggling, about the fact that I was 70, 3 years old, and didn't know what I was supposed to do with however many years I had left. Everyone had advice, Sarah said. "You need to get out more, Mom. Join a book club. Take a class." David said, "You're thinking too much. That's the problem. You need to tire yourself out during the day." My doctor said, "It's very common in elderly patients. We can try melatonin." Elderly. I hated that word. Still do. So I tried the melatonin. Tried going to bed later. Tried reading until my eyes hurt. Nothing worked. I kept waking up. and I kept feeling like there was something I was supposed to be doing, supposed to be hearing, but I didn't know what. Then one Sunday, I was at church. I still went every week back then, mostly out of habit, and this woman I barely knew sat down next to me. Her name was Dorothy Milhouse. She was 86, sharp as a tack, and she had this way of looking at you like she could see right through whatever mask you were wearing. After the service, she touched my arm. "You look tired, Ruth," she said. I laughed. "I'm not sleeping well." "Old age, I guess." She didn't smile. "What time do you wake up?" The question surprised me. 3, usually. Sometimes 4. Dorothy nodded slowly. "And you fight it, don't you? Try to go back to sleep." "Of course I do. I need my rest." She squeezed my arm, and her grip was stronger than I expected. "No, honey, you need to listen." That's when everything changed. Dorothy invited me to her house that afternoon. She made tea, real tea, loose, leaf, in a pot that looked older than both of us, and we sat in her kitchen while the autumn light came through the window. "My Harold died in 1996, she said. Harold had been her husband, and about a year later, I started waking up at 4 in the morning. Every single morning. I was furious about it. I went to 3 different doctors. What did they say? I asked. They said what doctors say. Sleep hygiene, medication, therapy. She poured the tea with steady hands. But then my sister got sick. Cancer. She lived in Florida, and I was up here in Ohio. We talked on the phone every week, but I felt so helpless. She paused, and something in her face shifted. One morning, I woke up at 4, and I just knew. I can't explain it better than that. I knew I needed to get on a plane that day. Not next week when I'd planned. That day, did you? I asked. I did. I called the airline at 6 in the morning, changed my flight, threw some things in a bag. She looked at me. My sister died that night. But I was there. I held her hand. We said everything we needed to say. My throat got tight. You think waking up was. What? God telling you to go. I think, Dorothy said carefully, that there are hours when the world is quieter, when we're not distracted by the noise of living. And in those hours, if we pay attention, we can hear things we miss during the day. That was the first thing nobody tells you about waking up in those dark hours. It's not about sleep. It's about listening. But I wasn't convinced. Not yet. Dorothy's story was beautiful, but I thought maybe it was just coincidence. Maybe she would have changed her flight anyway. Maybe the wake-ups didn't mean anything except that I was getting old and my body didn't work right anymore. Then I met Eleanor. Eleanor Patterson lived 3 doors down from me. She was 88, widowed, and sharp-tongued in a way I admired. We'd wave to each other, exchange pleasantries about the weather, but we weren't close. One morning, I'd been awake since 3:30. I saw her outside at 6, sitting on her porch in her bathrobe. It was November, cold. I went out. "Eleanor, are you all right?" I asked. She looked up at me, and her eyes were red. "Do you ever wake up and just know something's wrong, even though you can't explain it?" I sat down next to her, even though the cold went right through my coat. "What time did you wake up?" 3:15, she said. "What did you know?" I asked. She started crying then. Not loud, just tears running down her cheeks. "My son hasn't called in 2 weeks. We had an argument, a stupid one about politics or something. I can't even remember, but I woke up and I know something's wrong with him. I can feel it." "Have you tried calling?" I asked. "He won't answer." "He's stubborn." She wiped her face. "I'm probably being a foolish old woman." "What's his name?" I asked. "Michael. He's 61. Lives in Denver." I took her hand. "Eleanor, I don't think you're foolish. I think you should call him. And if he doesn't answer, you should keep calling." She did. She called him 11 times that day. He finally answered at 8 that night. Eleanor told me later, standing in that same spot on her porch, what happened. He answered, and I could tell right away something was off, she said. His voice was flat. I said, "Michael, tell me the truth. What's going on?" And he'd broke down. He'd been planning to kill himself, Ruth. He had the pills. He was going to do it that night. My stomach dropped. "Oh my God!" He said the only reason he answered was because I wouldn't stop calling. He thought something might be wrong with me. She gripped my hands. I flew out there the next day. He's getting help now. Real help. I went home that night and sat in my kitchen, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. That was the second thing. The wake-ups aren't just about you. Sometimes God is waking you up because someone you love needs you, needs your prayers, needs you to reach out, even if you can't explain why. But there was more. And what came next hit even closer to home. It was January, cold and dark. I'd been waking up at 3:47 for weeks straight. Always the same time. It had started to frighten me, if I'm honest, because it felt so specific, so deliberate. One morning, I woke up at 3:47, and that heavy feeling was back on my chest. Pressure. Not pain, just wrongness. And I heard this voice in my head, not a real voice, but the kind of knowing that comes from somewhere deeper than your thoughts. And it said, "Call David." David was my son, 63 years old, lived 2 hours away. We talked every Sunday. It was Thursday. I looked at the clock. 3:47 a.m. I couldn't call him. He'd think I'd fallen or had a heart attack. But the pressure on my chest got heavier. My heart started pounding. I called. He answered on the 5th ring. "Mom, Mom, what's wrong?" I don't know," I said. "Are you all right?" There was this long silence. Then, "No, what's happening?" I asked. His voice cracked. I'm at the hospital. Jennifer, that was his wife, she's in surgery. An aneurysm. They called me at midnight. I've been here alone, and Mom. They don't know if she's going to make it. I went cold all over. Why didn't you call me? I asked. I didn't want to wake you. I was going to call in the morning. I'm coming, I said. Right now. I drove 2 hours in the dark, and I sat with my son in that waiting room while they operated on his wife. Jennifer survived. She's fine now. But David looked at me that morning, after the doctor came out, and said she'd made it through. And he said something I'll never forget. How did you know to call? He asked. I woke up, I said, and I knew. He didn't say anything, just held my hand. That's the third thing. Sometimes you're woken up because you're needed. Not tomorrow. Not when it's convenient. Right then in the dark, when someone is sitting alone and scared and doesn't want to burden you. The fourth thing I learned came from a priest. After everything with David and Jennifer, I went to talk to Father Matthews at my church. He was young, maybe 50, but he'd studied theology, and I needed someone to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. I told him everything. The wake-ups, Dorothy, Eleanor, David. He listened, and when I finished, he leaned back in his chair. Ruth, do you know what the hours between 3 and 5 in the morning are called in some spiritual traditions? He asked. I shook my head. The hour of the wolf, the witching hour. But in Christian mysticism, it's called the hour of divine mercy. He smiled. It's the time when the veil between us and God is thinnest, when distractions fall away, when we're most able to hear. So it's real, I asked. It's not just coincidence, I think, he said carefully, that God speaks to us in many ways, and most of the time we're too busy to hear. But at 3 in the morning, when everything is quiet, when your mind hasn't filled up with the day yet, that's when the still, small voice can get through. He told me about saints who woke to pray at those hours, about monks who kept vigils, about the Jewish tradition of midnight prayers. What am I supposed to do? I asked. When you wake up, he said, don't fight it. Sit with it, pray, listen. Pay attention to what comes into your mind. Who comes into your mind? And if nothing comes, I asked, then maybe, he said. The point is just to be still, to remember that you're not in control, that something bigger is moving, and you're part of it. I cried in his office. I'm not ashamed to say it. That's the fourth thing. The wake-ups aren't a punishment or a malfunction. They're an invitation to be still, to be quiet, to remember that there's something bigger than your own small life. Here's what I learned after 6 years of waking up in the dark. The world teaches us that sleep is the most important thing. That if we're not getting 8 hours, something's wrong and we need to fix it. but sometimes being awake when you're supposed to be sleeping is exactly where you need to be. The truth was simpler and harder than I wanted it to be. I couldn't control when I woke up, but I could control what I did when I was awake. I could fight it, take pills, lie there frustrated, or I could light a candle, say a prayer, and ask what I was supposed to hear. And here's the part people don't want to accept. Sometimes you wake up and nothing happens. No dramatic revelation. No urgent phone call. Just you and the dark and the quiet. But that's enough. Because in that quiet, you remember you're not alone. You remember there's a rhythm to the world that's bigger than your schedule. The most important thing, when someone comes into your mind at 3 in the morning, a name, a face, a memory, pay attention. That's not random. Call them. Pray for them. Write them a letter. Because I've learned that those nudges, those quiet urgings, they matter more than we know. I still wake up at 3:47, not every night anymore, but a few times a week. I don't fight it now. I keep a notebook by my bed, and I write down who comes to mind. I pray for them. Sometimes I call them the next day. Sometimes I don't, but I pay attention. Last week, I woke up thinking about Sarah, my daughter. Her marriage had fallen apart 2 years ago, and she'd been struggling. I called her that morning, and she told me she'd just gotten a job offer she'd been hoping for. She was happy. We talked for an hour. Would I have called her anyway? Maybe, but maybe not. I'm grateful now for those dark hours. I won't lie and say I never get tired. I'm 92. Everything makes me tired. But I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not angry about it. Maybe one day I'll sleep through the night again. But for now, when I wake up and see that 3:47 on the clock, I say a quiet thank you. And I listen. Thank you for sitting with me, for listening to an old woman talk about waking up in the dark. If you want to sit with me again, I'll be here. Still waking up, still listening, still learning what those quiet hours have to teach me. Take care of yourself, whatever that means for you. And if you wake up tonight at 3 or 4, don't be afraid. Just be still and listen. You might be surprised what you hear.